Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. It's 7 p.m. on the 2nd of February, and I am delighted to host yet another LinkedIn Live with you. I am getting a notice from StreamYard that they cannot post this to LinkedIn. Now it's saying you're live. That's great. I hope I'm live. I just got a message from StreamYard saying you're not able to go live. Let's just give it a second to see if this is working. It's saying it's live. All right. Well, good to see all of you. Great to be here. And I'm always excited by LinkedIn Lives, but I'm super excited today because I am hosting somebody I've known for a long time. And also, I have been working with on facilitation, training, even a bit of coaching, and also around the theme of leadership and sales. Okay. And that's what we're going to explore together today. How can sales skills help you with growing your career? Without much further ado, let's get right into it, shall we? Hello, Vivek.
Hey, Sham, how are you?
I'm doing so well. How are you?
Good, very good. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's
Oh,
lovely to
you're
be here.
welcome. You're welcome. It's great to have you. And as I was just saying that, I've worked with you all at Wilson Learning in so many, different settings. And I think I should start by saying that I was literally in a facilitation, in a training session, facilitating 25 people using Wilson Learning sales skills. So I'm like super excited about the timing of this session. Thanks for making the time for being with us.
Absolutely, no problem.
Great. You know what? We're going to go get right to it. Just
Sure.
jump right
Yeah.
to the right into the topic. There's two things we're talking about: sales and career. You bring in all the sales expertise, and I kind of talk about
You
career a
bring
lot
all
of
the
the time.
career.
So at some point, we kind of mix the two and make some sense out of it. So let me start
Yeah.
by asking, what makes a good salesperson? I mean, when I say sales skills, what are these really?
Well, there's many tips and tricks, stuff like that you can talk about, in terms of being successful in sales.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really look at people who've been consistently successful for a long period of time, it almost always happens to do with the fact that they have a natural curiosity in what someone else is doing. And so when you try and really understand this from your customer's perspective in the sales world,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to do things that are slightly different from a person who's trying to pull a fast one on you or get a quick win or any of those kind of things. And so that really is what I see as the major difference. It's your intent, it's your curiosity in someone else's success
Mm-hmm.
that really puts you in a position where a a single loss doesn't phase you too much. One,
Right.
because you're always interested. You're always looking at every discussion, conversation that you have as something that you learn from.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sure, if it's a win, it's great. We can celebrate it and have a lot of fun and do all of those things. But like I said, if I were to sum it up very short and very quickly, I would say people who generally have a good curiosity and interest in customer success and who are willing to put themselves on the line to do that consistently end up being more successful than people who have sort of all the tricks in the book, so to speak. But
Right.
if I
Right.
say
Right.
this, then I'll say that kind of stuff. So that's what I see as a big difference between someone who's successful in sales, consistently successful for a long time, and someone who's
Right. Curiosity in others' success and being consistent about it. That's such a contrary answer to what I would have thought. It would be like, interest in making money,
yeah,
being commercially minded and, fixing commercial issues and things, networking, communication. I mean, those are I
yeah.
think that's what you mean by tips, tricks. Do you?
Exactly. Well, that, and then there's the old tricks as well. If somebody says this, then say that kind of stuff as well. Like how do you handle
Yeah.
a tricky objection, for example, some
Mm-hmm,
of those kind
mm-hmm,
of things, or how do I make you like the old insurance salesperson basically tells you if you don't buy you could die and everything would be all lost.
Yes.
So there's that fear sale kind of thing as well.
Yes.
But yeah, that ultimately is what it comes down to is do you have genuine curiosity in their interest, and are you willing to learn about how whatever you're selling is actually going to help them be successful.
Right.
A lot of times the issue with sales in general is that we believe that it is over when the transaction is over.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that's really the start in terms of a longer relationship that you have, depending on what you're selling and how you're selling, of course. But it's your ability to then continue to make sure that they see value in or they see an end to what they can achieve with what you're selling that gives them the outcome that they want. That's really
right. Yeah. So if let me play this back to you, right? If I was to say that the skills you're talking about is the ability to stay curious about others' success, staying consistently with them, and ensuring that they get to where they want, need to get to, you're describing a coach, Vivek.
Well, ultimately, I guess in a very small way, you might end up being that in your area of expertise. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. No, I love the way that when we talk about so many different, one of my interests, Vivek, is specialists and generalists, and this debate, I enter this debate with many people all the time, right? And I find that a lot of the world has been siloed into or separated into different kind of specialisms, but ultimately everyone's kind of trying to do the same thing in getting people to do well, getting a customer, a client to do well and succeed. So on that note, in talking about helping others to succeed, I'd like to welcome our audience. We have Simon Fellows saying hello Simon, good to have you. Satyashri says hello as well. Christy says hi Christy, welcome. Any point in time, please folks, we will be thriving with through your questions and comments in the chat, so please feel free to put in anything at any time. This is a highly unstructured conversation. Vivek and I are just having a chat, and you can drive this as much as we are likely to. So sales skills and what makes a good salesperson. How do you teach this, Vivek? I mean, Wilson Learning has been in this area for over 5 decades, and you have been leading Wilson Learning in India for over a decade, 15 years or so. How does one teach these skills? Where does it even begin?
Well, you can't teach curiosity, obviously. That's a natural thing. But ultimately, it comes down to what you've got to ask yourself. If you're in sales, that is right. If you're in sales, why did you get into it? Is a good question to start from, and then sort of figure out what actually excited you about it. So a lot of people will say, hey, I like talking to new people. Okay, go a little bit further. What do you like talking to people about? Do you like the sound of your own voice, or is that genuinely a conversation that you want to have with other people? Because if you like the sound of your own voice, then you might want to do something slightly different than selling. Because again, what you want to be able to do is to connect with people in a way that helps them see value in working with you. And that's true of any profession. I mean, let's take example of the audience that you were with earlier today that you mentioned.
Yes.
We were talking about selling skills to them. They were not a sales team, right? They're a highly technical delivery team who because of the exposure that they have with customers, needed to position new stuff, because otherwise it'd be a lost opportunity for the organization. And also even from a value delivering point of view to that client that you might be working with. What ends up happening is if you just provide the regular service that you do without necessarily adding value, it becomes easy for them to replace you later on, right? If somebody cheaper comes along or somebody with a better proposition comes along, it makes it easier. But if you use that advantage of talking about that group that you were with, if you're able to use that face time that you have with your clients in a way that you engage them, understand what is going on in their world, how are they servicing their customers, and how can your technology or your products or your services add value to them, things that they may not have considered, right? Having discussions that are outside sort of your defined contract terms really can help you drive that up. So it's a bit more about looking at things from a slightly more holistic perspective than just what am I here to do.
Yeah. I love the fact that you started by saying, do you really want to do this, and why do you want to be a salesperson? And you connecting it back to what you said earlier about curiosity. That innate sense of
Yeah,
curiosity in what a customer wants is important, because that old way of picking up the phone and trying to push something out there has changed, hasn't it? It's no longer a
yeah,
push. Here's what I have, take it.
yeah, and that worked when people didn't have enough information,
Mhm.
right? Today we can get all the information we want anytime we want,
Yes,
anywhere we want. So
indeed.
if somebody who's positioning something or selling something comes to you and repeats the same things that are already on your website, it kind of is a waste of time for the other person listening to you.
Mhm.
So you want to be able to add more to that. You want to be able to provide additional context, bring in your own expertise, because one of the advantages you have if you're in sales is that you end up servicing a kind of industry or an industry in repeatedly. So you know what problems exist at a macro level. How do you
Yeah.
then distill it with sort of better questions to understand how it affects that organization vis-a-vis their position in the market or any of those kind of things? That really genuinely helps the other person also say, hey, this person's actually interested in my success, so
Mhm.
let me talk to them. And just like there is one salesperson, there are many salespeople.
Yeah.
And so as a customer, if I'm going to spend time with one person over another person, that's a decision that I get to make, and
Yeah.
a decision that you will not never be previewed to, right? So if 5 people are contacting me, if I believe that one person has more information or better insight to give me, and if I give them an hour and I just give everybody else 10 minutes, the person who gets 10 minutes has no sense of the fact that someone else has got an hour. And the
Mm.
person who gets an hour doesn't have a sense of someone else has got just 10 minutes. But as a customer, I'm making that decision based on my initial belief of what value you can bring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that
Indeed.
becomes really important as well.
I mean, value, you use the word value, and there is, you could talk about value for an hour on its own, right?
Of course, yeah.
I mean, and I know I've shared this with you, I think, but I'll share with the audience today that, I spent time in pricing and sales for quite a while I was at ARM.
Yeah.
And I used to be involved in the sell of intellectual property, which by
Mhm.
nature is so intangible. How do you value
Exactly.
how do you value a piece of code? Of course, I'm saying this in 2022 where NFTs are everywhere. How do you
Yeah.
value an NFT? It's a very similar thing. It's an art.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
value is really in the eye of the beholder. Of
Yeah. Exactly.
something that is worth 1 million to one person might be worth 10 million to another, and nothing to another, because they already have
Absolutely.
it, right?
Yeah.
So getting an understanding of that value is so key. One of
Yeah.
the other thoughts that came to me, and we're going to start connecting this back to careers in a moment, is
Sure.
the fact that the days of like the Wolf of Wall Street, Leonardo DiCaprio calling and making a
Yeah.
sell on the phone, somehow making it work on
Yeah.
ethically moral kind of borderlines. That's what you see on TV and film,
Yeah.
which is the filmy notions of what sale is. But what you're
Yeah.
describing is really more of sitting down, understanding, pulling them towards you, rather than pushing them with a message of
Right.
buy, right?
And
It's
also
a
sitting down and understanding is a right that you have to earn before you can get it. That's sort of more important, right? Because people don't have time.
Yeah.
And the old saying goes, busy people make time, is
Mhm.
because then they actually, the reason why somebody gives you a certain amount of time is because they either believe or they hope that you're going to add some value.
Yeah.
And if that sort of is not the case in your first few minutes, you're going to lose that individual very quickly,
True. True.
regardless of whether it's in a sales situation or otherwise.
True. I mean, that reminded me of my ex-boss, and when I used to live in the UK, the phrase he used to use was, "I have a lot of time for you," which was his
Yeah,
way of saying, "I trust you, and I will
exactly.
give you time. And if you ask for half an hour, I'll give you half an hour, because I know what you want to say is important, because it solves a problem. It's something that you really genuinely want to achieve." So, time, value, and I'll come back to this pull push in just a moment. I just want
Yeah,
to say hello to a few more people. Atul, hi,
sure.
welcome, join. Welcome to be with us. Sham, hello. Shonik, hi. Also want to say to David Yesford, he's unfortunately showing up just as LinkedIn user, but I can see him on the LinkedIn page. Hi, David. Welcome. Good to have all of you here. Good to have all of you here. So the link I want to make to careers, Vivek, is the fact that I feel, and please feel free to disagree with me.
No, of
I
course, yeah.
am in no way an expert. Is the fact that the whole pushing my CV out there, pushing my resume,
Mhm.
pushing my profile to you and saying, hire me, hire me. It's just becoming increasingly impossible in a very busy and noisy world, right? And I find in my work that it's much longer term, driven by the words you said, curiosity
Yeah,
and consistency. If you consistently put yourself out there and you're there,
yeah,
um, the chances of you attracting, pulling the right employers become higher over time. It's the long game. Instead of shooting your resumes out there, it's very similar to just throwing proposals in the wind, right? I mean, it doesn't
yeah,
work.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I was wondering how we could connect these ideas that you have spoken about from a sales perspective to applying these ideas into more of a pull strategy for growing your careers.
Yeah, well, on the blasting, there's also many memes and jokes that I've read about um, people starting to use LinkedIn a lot more just before they're either updating your resume or just
Yes,
after they've updated
of
the
course.
resume, right?
Yes.
And that's true with networking as well. It's taking a different shape and form with technology today because it's all open and everyone's out there.
Hmm.
Even earlier, you could potentially put your resume out there multiple times, but it sort of gave you a very similar response in that we're not. How do I put this? In terms of if you're only going to somebody when you need something, it's really
Hmm.
not networking, right? I mean, you do that really well. Is a lot of what I see of what you do in LinkedIn is much more about let me put my ideas, my thoughts, my suggestions, and even just stories that I've heard out in there. People are interested. They want to know what's good, what experiences other people have had, and learn from those. And so, in the context of social media and things like that, like I will raise my hand and say that I do it very little. So if you go look for LinkedIn stuff that I have put, there's not going to be too much. But I'm also guilty of not doing that. But I
Hmm.
do see the value in you know consistently networking with people when there is no need for you,
Yeah.
which then sort of magically, I don't know how, but when you have a need, because you're familiar, because people are used to seeing you, seeing your inputs, seeing your ideas, there is a familiarity that builds. And I've seen it surprise a lot of people when they least expected it. Somebody said, "Hey, yeah, I've got something right to me. I know some people who might be able to help." So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reason why they do that is not because you have a great resume or because you have high qualifications, is because they've built that familiarity with you over a period of time.
Yes.
So again, to what we talked about a little bit earlier, and we probably will talk about it a little more too, in the context of trust, there is a certain amount of trust that's built in because of that interaction that you have, and that
Yes.
then enables you, right? And I joke about this often to salespeople that I talk to. Is in a workshop, I say, well, how many of you have good relationships with procurement people? And most of the time, salespeople say no. I said, well, you only talk to them when there's an opportunity. Why should they not? Why should they treat you any different
Exactly.
than every
Yeah.
other vendor? Why
Yeah.
should? And this is sort of same analogy can apply here as well. You're just another white paper with your name on it. Like, why should they treat you any different,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
these days, with a lot of AI tech and everything, the filtration process is pretty good too. I can sort of, if I'm looking for a candidate, I can shortlist by qualification, kind of university, how many years of experience, so on and so forth. But even after you do all that, there's still thousands.
Yes.
So you may not be, one in a million scrambling for the same thing, but you're definitely one in 10,000, which increases your odds, but not by too much, right?
Hmm.
So that's I think, and that sort of goes back to the sales as well. You're just another proposal, like you said, instead of
Yes.
you're actually somebody who's human,
Indeed.
who wants to interact with people and learn from them.
Hmm. I mean, in one of our recent sessions, one of the attendees said, people
Yeah.
buy from people. So it's
Yeah.
important to really understand what the person really wants. And I've written about this once, saying that
Mhm.
if you are applying for a job, sometimes we tend to look at it very mechanically. There is a job, there
Mhm.
is an opening. We kind of tend not to really think about the fact that there's a human at the other end of the line wanting to
Mhm.
hire someone and fix a problem. And
Yeah.
usually, I mean, we've hired people, right? We know how hard it is, right?
Exactly.
And if only while looking for a role, we try to empathize with the fact that there's a human being on the other side looking to hire someone and fill a role and get something done. That
Yeah,
is very similar to how you would empathize with a client and fixing a
yeah,
problem,
absolutely.
right?
Agree
Um,
100%. Yeah.
and we at Wilson talk about that, whole the technology aspect of it and the people aspect of it, and finding that balance between the two.
Mhm.
And I find that especially using technology is how you are empathizing now, because
Exactly. Yeah.
right, I mean, because if you take, even writing on LinkedIn, having a brand, we talk a lot about brand. What we're really trying to do is signal to the world and saying, I'm here, and
Yeah.
this is my story. I know what I can, I'm here to do. Is this something you, if you are interested, tell me. Because
Yeah.
ultimately, even my ex-boss in sales used to say, they should call you, they should
Mhm.
come to you, they should come.
Mhm.
And once you put yourself out there, you are at least offering a window for the world to come to you or see
Yeah,
you at least.
absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And this is one of the things that we talk about, and going talking about what we set out as a topic for today in terms of how can sales skills help you in your career. The foundation to good sales skills is good trust that you build with people,
Yeah,
and that's true of any relationship that you have, personal, professional, even your friends for that matter. So it's one of those things where it's people wait for it to happen naturally, and when you do that, it happens sometimes and it doesn't happen other times. But there are things that you can do that can actually help contribute to your ability to build trust with a person before you start sort of selling to them whatever it is, whether it's your
indeed.
resume, your product, yourself, your skills, whatever it can be. So
I
that
mean,
that trust is really important.
yeah, I mean, first stage is trust, and technology is allowing you to build trust at a mass scale, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
exactly.
you're building trust at a mass scale. I mean, all this talk about influencers and so on. If you're trying to build a
Yeah.
career, if you're still going through the CV resume way, and I'm not saying that doesn't work, it does work. Of course, it works
Yeah.
in places. Um, but the idea is to build that trust even before you even meet me, right? And that is
Mhm.
happening so much more often.
Yeah.
CVs, resumes, recruiters are not looking at. If you want to grow your career, people want to look at your bio, your website, your
Yeah.
LinkedIn profile. They want to understand more about you. That a one-page CV or a two-page CV is not going to tell me. Yeah, and a
Yeah,
lot of
that's
that
true.
trust is built even before I say hello to you. I know there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
creepy part to it. I'm so sorry, but unfortunately, of people
That's
knowing
true.
so much about you. But
Yeah.
it's true. So we
But
need to
it's
embrace.
also only to the degree that you push out there, right? It's not like it's intrusive in that
Indeed,
sense. Yeah.
indeed. And that is the one lesson I've learned, Vivek, from corporate life and running a business myself, is that all businesses have a brand. Like, it's
Yeah.
obvious that Nike has a brand, Wilson Running as a brand. It is very obvious for us to talk about a brand and an organization. Corporate companies need a brand. Otherwise, how do you connect with them?
Yeah.
What is the company?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But the personal brand, I think a lot of us are still kind of working this through, right? And
Yeah.
we feel more comfortable with the word reputation. A
Mhm.
reputation is basically what people, Vivek has a reputation, Sham has a reputation, something people already know about us and think about us.
Yeah.
A brand is actually consciously built
Mhm.
intentionally by putting a certain. So if Wilson Learning wants to do something for your brand, you're intentionally talking about certain things, intentionally putting certain content out there. If you do it for yourself, your career progression will be driven by your personal brand, which is an intentional pursuit
Yeah.
of a certain way of being and looking and feeling, right?
And actually, that's a very good analogy, and that's true as well, because you're right. Like you said, a lot of this stuff happens before you say hello, or you get the chance to say
Mm,
hello. So when you think about it from that point of view, I think a lot of struggle that people might have is because it's out there, the idea that I have to get it 100% right the first time.
yeah,
Right. So there's a lot of pressure on that one to
true.
say, okay, personal brand is all that, it's all fine, but what if I make a mistake and tarnish my reputation, so to speak?
Yes,
That's a big fear
I agree.
that people might have, and that's one of the things that sales teaches you very early on, is to deal with rejection.
Indeed.
Right? It slaps you in the face when you least expect it, and it does teach you about two things. One is rejection, and the other is very, very quickly that no one cares about your glamorous degree or whatever you might have had,
Very
or
true.
even your past experience. Like you might have won a, $100 million deal 2 days ago, but today you're in front of a new customer. That doesn't mean anything.
No
And so you've
history.
got to start afresh from that same point of view.
Yeah.
And it's okay to make mistakes. That's what I'm trying to say, I guess. With the whole branding thing, you're not going to get it right the first time, and that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no memory to it, right? I mean, it's gone. What was last quarter, last year is over. And I think that mentality could really help us build our careers as well. I think that mentality of it's a fresh day, it's a fresh opportunity. What happened last time doesn't matter anymore. I think, or last
and can you
interview
learn
or
from it?
last change. What can you learn from it?
Yeah.
It's hard though. It's hard to.
It's very hard. It's very
How do you
hard.
accept
And
rejection?
you talk about in your book a lot too about reflection. It takes, like you said, if you're deliberately pushing, or if you're deliberately putting yourself out there, and like you said, it's a deliberate effort to create a brand. Like for an organization, it's also similar for that for an individual, is to be able to create your brand in that way. Now, obviously, when you're trying to do that, there's potential risk, and as you sit and idle around for a long time, that risk only seems bigger and bigger and bigger, and so the first step becomes harder and harder. So yeah, I agree that it's very hard to do. Reflection, like you point out in your book, is really important to be able to sit down and say, okay, yeah, I put a post out there, didn't get too much traction. What can I learn from it? What can I do differently? And then see if I can put it out there again.
Yep.
And if that doesn't work, do it again.
Do it again. Yeah. Repeat.
Repeat,
I think
but
that
with some learning, of course. Yeah.
repeat, repeat, improve,
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a great segue into a question from Ajay Sharma.
Sure.
Fantastic. I think in the context of what you just said, what general aspects or areas can further the conversation while networking? Sometimes you hit a wall after the initial connect. So what do you do when you hit a wall?
Well, Sham, you're better at this than networking, but I'll say one thing. To me, networking is an ongoing thing. So, when you say general aspects of areas that further conversations while networking, I think that automatically assumes that you've got a particular end and that's what you're working towards. Yep. I think networking has got to be more like fishing. You put your net out there and then you reel it back in to see what you get. If you got something good, great. And you can't go to the sea, fish, and say, I want tuna today. You don't know what you're going to get, right? So networking, at least the way I think about it, is a lot like that. First, you've got to be able to share your stuff, add value to people by putting stuff out there, and then what comes back. I don't think you can plan that to a degree. Anyway, I'll let you go for it, Sham, because you do a lot better than I do.
I completely agree. I think networking. I generally don't use the word networking much. I think the word's probably a bit tainted now, in the sense of there's so many ways of looking at networking. But I totally get you, Ajay, your question of what do you do when you make a connect and it just becomes silent and there's nothing happening, right? And all the work in my life and what I have seen my clients do better. I have coached people through transitions by connecting them with multiple people that they have previously not had connection with, and it all comes down to that old idea of an emotional deposit. Give until you can receive, right?
Yeah.
And the emotional deposit ideas came, I think, from Stephen Covey, if I remember.
Yes, he talks about it as well. Emotional banking,
emotional banking and emotional deposit. The idea is that if you open a bank account, and you can only withdraw after you put some money in it, and in the same way,
exactly.
If you want to actually get something out of somebody, like maybe a favor or a connection or a get my reference in, or push my resume into the whatever it is that you need, it can't be the way you initiate, or it can't be the thing that leads you into the conversation, because then you're going in, as Vivek said, with that intent. And I'm sure in sales you wouldn't do that either, would you, Vivek? I mean, you wouldn't go in with the whole "here's what I have" mindset. It would rather.
Well, sadly, it happens more than we think. Ideally, no, you shouldn't be. But it happens a lot, because a lot of times in the sales world, you have a product or a service that you sell, right? And it's natural to think about this as, this is all I've got.
Yes.
and I guess in some way that translates to what you're trying to do while networking if you're not in the sales world, which is much more about I have a resume and looking for a job and so on and so forth. So it's natural to view it that way. But like you said, it's got to be bigger than that.
It's got to be bigger.
And I think, and not all your connections are going to turn out to be great anyway.
True.
That's the other thing about sales, that if you were to link selling skills, you're going to get rejected by people who you desperately want to work with quite regularly.
That's true. Yeah. I think just to kind of round this off and maybe answer Ajay a little more succinctly is, I tend to, and I'll answer it from my perspective, is I tend to network more with people who might need something from me, in the sense of call it an easy win if you may, but I tend to network a lot more intentionally with people who might I could help initially, and then find a way to eventually. And by the way, it takes time. Networking or collaborating or whatever you call it takes a lot of time, and sometimes even now I get work from clients with whom I spoke to 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Sometimes after that they come and tell you, aha, today I got a literally today I got a call with somebody who I spoke to on Lunch Club like 16 18 months ago, something like that. And he called me today and said, would you like to coach a few of my team members? I'd like to set something up with you. So sometimes these things take time, but then the networking is all about, as you said, Vivek, driven by a sense of curiosity than a sense of wanting something. So it will come, but if we hit a wall, give more or place more deposits, stay in touch, do something for them, give them some information, connect them with somebody, come sideways, not very direct, maybe some of the things that came to our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that happen with customers calling me back after like 5 years, responding to an email that I wrote to them 5 years ago, saying the same thing, which is, hey, let's talk now. Sure.
Let's talk now. Yeah, exactly. So it's very difficult to gauge the ROI on something like that. So that's why coming back to your second tip, first one was about curiosity, second was consistency. Networking, it takes time, and consistency is very important. And I find platforms like this that we are on today is amazing, because it is allowing you to network at scale, and you can actually put something out there, say something out there that will reach how many ever thousands of people. And that was not possible earlier. And what happens is, it is not a matter of saying one thing once and then forgetting about it. It is saying something along the line. Like I talk about careers, I've been talking about it for over a year now, right? And it is about the fact that you are always there talking about that thing, presenting your views authentically, transparently, and so on. And then over the year, Vivek, I kid you not, I've had situations where people have come and said, I've been watching you for 6 months, I'd like to work with you now. Or I've been watching you for 6 months, I bought your book, I read it, and I'd like to work with you now. So that's the bit about that trust building that happens completely outside.
And I bet you those weren't people you were trying to get in touch with anyway.
No, right? I don't even know they existed.
Exactly. That's the point. Yeah.
And that is the way the pull strategy works so much better. I think there's a huge analogy between sales and and careers, because if you just put yourself out there and talk about your work and help them see that this is something valuable, then when they need you, when they need something that you have, you will be the only person they call.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that's true of sales as well. I've had a lot of, some of my salespeople do this really well. It's like, yeah, we lost an opportunity this time, but you know what? This is what the client said. They're going to come back to us for something else later on.
Yeah.
And 7 times out of 10, they do. Yeah. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
And when do you walk away, Vivek? Let's touch upon that. And then there's so many more questions coming. I'm just going to ask you a question, but I have one. When do you decide when to walk away?
Well, there are many different reasons why you would. First is if you're making a loss, or if there's if you're not the right fit, that might be a good time to walk. If your sort of values don't align in some places, because again, getting a client is one part of the task, keeping the client is another. So you wanted to look at how well you can work together in the long term. That's another thing to look at. What else in terms of walking away? when any situation is not going to help you meet your interests, is a good time to walk.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, one of the things that we talk is, win-win is a big term that everybody keeps using, but we often think about win-win not as simultaneous, but more sequentially. Right. In the sales world, we often think when the transaction is complete, both parties win. Sure, in some small way, yes. But whatever your customer is buying from you, they're going to use it for something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When they're successful in using it for that something is when they win.
Yes.
Not when they buy it, because when they buy it, it's an expense.
Yes.
It's losing money technically, right?
That's right.
And when they achieve the result is when they win. So
is when they win.
As a salesperson, are you willing to go through that whole journey with them and really help them see the value in that and see it through completion? If you see that possibility is an issue, then that might be a good time to pull away as well. Ultimately, if you sense a bad deal and if it's not going to meet your interests, move.
Excellent. Well, Ajay says thank you. And I have questions from Jeevan, I have questions from Prasanna, and I have questions from Shivakumar. But I'm going to bring in the question from Shivakumar because it's related to what we're talking. Then we'll go to Jeevan and Prasanna as well. Shivakumar has a question: how to effectively network with people who are at a higher professional position? It's natural to feel that you're wasting their time if you just want to keep in touch without really having anything substantial to offer. Interesting.
Well, first of all, I find it hard to believe that you don't have anything substantial to offer. That's going to be difficult. That's you might want to work on that first. But in terms of how to effectively network with people who are at a higher position professionally, well, again, I don't see any difference, Shyam, because in what you just talked about, I'm sure a lot of people that you talked about in terms of coming back to you are people at senior positions. So you're not really. Again, I think it goes back to what we talked about with the previous question: is are you trying to network to some end? And if that's what you're trying to do, then this becomes a bigger problem. But if you're not, then if you're just putting stuff out there in terms of what you're doing and connecting with people and sharing things that can be of value to them, at the end of the day, higher positional people are also just people. And so they're also interested in learning more about certain things. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, Shyam, because again, like I said, with networking, you're a little bit better than I am.
No, not at all. Especially if you are growing your career, networking with senior people takes time. Let me just get the time thing out of the way. But it also goes in stages. And if you think you have nothing to offer, you do. And what you do have something to offer is you may have praise, you may have acknowledgement, you may have information for them that they don't have access to in what so to speak. That they don't see because they are at a totally different space, leading organizations in the streets, what's going on. That perspective you may offer. The best thing that has worked for me when I've tried to network with people who are higher placed or doing bigger things is to simply keep on sending compliments or acknowledgements authentically, truthfully. Basically, I read your book, this is what I loved about it, or I saw this announcement, your company is doing some fantastic work, one day I hope to be working with you. That's it. You don't expect a response, right? Do this 6 times. Again, not every day, over a few weeks. 4, 5, 6 times over 2-3 week cadence every time. And then you send a message, your chances of getting a response are very high without asking for too much. The point with high professionals is if you ask for too much in one shot, they can't do it. If you literally ask them a closed-ended yes or no question, you are much likely to get a response, right? So senior people, try to give. You do have something to offer. Think about what you could. Best thing with senior people is acknowledgement of their work and saying thank you, because you might have read something about them, you might have seen them in the paper, you might have seen an announcement about the work they did. Just acknowledge it. I saw it. I've done it with I'm writing now, so I tend to do it with authors. I literally just write 4 lines saying I read your book, but be specific. I say I read this thing and I loved it because it helped me do this. So I just don't say great book. That doesn't do anything. It's not going to do anything for you if you network with, I saw your photo on the paper, you look good. That's not going to help. I saw you in the paper, I read the article, this is one thing I like, I really like what you're doing. That's good. But that is only a start. You need to build on top of that. So Hope that
And
helps.
if you want to, as a build on to that, Shyam, if you want to add more value, if you've read something else that complements or gives it
Yes.
from a different perspective, share that and say you might be interested in this as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something you wrote in a different newspaper, and I was just chanced upon it. I have sent it to my coach before. I just say a random photo. I see his book in a random bookstore. I'll take a photo and send it to him, and he always loves it, even today. Um, let's go to more questions. Prasanna has got a question for us. After a while, I feel sales job feels like philanthropy, being congenial and wishing for returns, only hopefully.
Oh, can you elaborate on that question, Shyam? I'm not sure.
Well, let's see it
Yeah.
the way I kind of see it is it really about just kind of doing nice things and hoping things will work out,
Not
or is
really.
there a little more science to it?
There is. So, uh, if I may, I'll digress briefly
Please.
into some Wilson learning stuff. So, we often talk about the salesperson has two roles. The first role is what we call the consultant role, right? This is where you are seen as a source of advantage to your client's organization or to your client as an individual, right? So if you call somebody and say, "Can I come and talk to you?" They agree because they feel that you're going to add value to them and their lives, and you're going to add value to their business. The second side of it is what we call the strategist side, whereas this is where you are being seen as a source of advantage to your own company, meaning you're meeting your goals, you're getting the numbers in, and you're bringing in profitable revenue
Correct. Yeah.
in a timely manner.
Hmm.
I always say put the two together and be the best consultant you can be to those customers who can fulfill your strategic objectives, which goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier. When do you walk away?
Yeah.
When you have to keep going and doing this, let me give, it works on the networking side. But if you're in an actual discussion in a sales opportunity, then that changes a little bit because that requires you to invest your time.
That's right.
And that's a limited resource, right? So you have to be careful about where you choose to invest your time. And oftentimes I see that people get stuck with that sort of an idea to say, I'm only giving everything, I'm not getting anything back. You've got to really look at your opportunities and go, where am I spending time? Am I spending time in the right opportunities? And are they likely to give me the returns? And then based on that, you decide whether you want to drop it, pick up another one, because the same amount of time that you're spent hoping that a customer
Hmm.
will buy can probably be switched over to a different customer who is likely to buy.
Yeah.
But if you spend all that time here, you don't have the time to spend somewhere else because there are only so many hours in a day. So that's sort of a slightly different way to look at it. In that, yeah, you want to help your customers, but you also want to make sure that your interests are met.
Yes, 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 yes. I mean, and that kind of has large parallels with how you grow a career as well.
Mhm.
Because if you are applying online to many, 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 many different organizations, you ultimately need to have a view on where you'd like to be. Also, otherwise, you're going to be
Yeah.
a terrible choice overload. I know it's very entitled to talk about choice overload because you have too many choices.
Mhm.
For example, if you are trying to go and find out find new clients and grow your business, where do you spend a lot of time is a very
Mhm.
important question to answer, because I could be online applying to a million jobs every day, or I could be prioritizing down to 5 people with whom, if I spend
Yeah.
some quality time, they could lead me somewhere. So the prioritization aspect of it is very important. One of the
Absolutely, and that's
favorite
one of the things that a lot of salespeople struggle with as well. Is how do I prioritize this pipeline or this territory that I've got in a way that it
yeah,
actually helps
yeah.
meet my interest?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, one of the things, actually, you know what? I want to say something, but I know that Jeevan's asked two questions and I really want to answer that. Jeevan says, hi. And then he says, I have a question about how do you acquire or what to look into the skill set when you want to pivot into sales, I presume. Jeevan's asking, if I want to pivot into
Mhm.
sales, what would you say a skill set would be?
Hmm. Interesting question. I'll go back to my first response. Are you genuinely curious in working with people? Are you genuinely curious about what other people do? Are you curious about learning things? And if you are, then that is a skill set that will hold you good in the long run. Everything else that you need in terms of having a methodology or a process to follow, that can come in at a later point in time. But the first part is, if you're going to pivot, can you have a conversation with somebody where they're the focus of attention, not you?
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have that as a fundamental interest, I think that would be a good sort of skill set to move. Of course, there are other things like, how do you continue to prospect? How do you focus on, building better relationships with your customers, questions, negotiations? There's a bunch of different things that you can talk about, but boiling down to a very basic fundamental is, why do you want to make that switch to sales?
Yeah.
What do you think is exciting about it? If it's just the commissions, then pause, learn some stuff, and then move. But if it's beyond that, then find out what it is, find that purpose that actually initially attracted you to, and then work on that. That's all I'd say.
Yeah. No, I agree. And in terms of hard skills, no, like it's very hard to say curiosity is a hard skill, or empathy, or listening. I mean, even though nowadays listening comes up a lot in our work, right?
Yeah.
Of being a good listener and so on, and asking questions, great questions, and so on. And that's, by the way, exactly the two things you need to be a good coach. You need to ask great questions and listen to what others are saying. So in a way, there's that coaching
And
aspect.
going back to that, Shyam, empathy, and it's two interesting things that you talk about: empathy and your ability to do all of those things. I think I don't want to diminish those skills, because those are very specific skills in terms of empathy and listening skills. But I think someone who's naturally curious, or is closely aligned to their general sense of curiosity, tends to be a little bit more empathetic and is willing to listen more in general. It's a generalization. It may not be something that you might need to learn as much as someone else for instance.
Got it. I completely understand.
So I think that those two, all three of them go really well. So if I were to re-answer that question, I would say curiosity, empathy, and listening effectively.
Yeah. And if I am reading a little bit further into Jeevan's question, and only because I see this a lot with my clients in the work I do, is the fact that the real skills you need is one thing, which is curiosity, empathy, and listening and questioning, and really wanting to help them solve their problem. But exactly like Prasanna said, that sounds like super philanthropic. But how do I get a job in sales? If I sit in an interview and say, I listen very well and I ask great questions, or how do you put that in a CV? So there's a disconnect between what you really need to do and how do you get yourself out there and get yourself a job, or pivot into sales. I think there is a disconnect in the way you present yourself for a job in sales, and this underlying hard skills that are sitting there, which are very close to the heart of are you
absolutely.
truly interested in helping someone out? So there's a disconnect with how you sell yourself as a salesman.
Yeah, that's true, and that disconnect exists in sales throughout anyway, because naturally people are not very trusting salespeople in general. Right? I mean, think about this: if you go to a store and you want a particular brand of, I don't know, anything, and if the salesperson says, "Hey, let me show you some other options," almost instantly the first thought that comes to mind: why is this guy not giving me what I want? Why does this person want to? Maybe they're getting better commission. So there's always unstated interests that are assumed on the other side, which you have to clarify.
Correct.
In much the same way, if you don't have a background in sales, if you're going into sales, there's going to be a similar sort of an issue there. And I think one of the things that can help really is your ability to talk about things that you have done where you've had to sell an idea or a concept or anything to somebody inside your organization, to actually say, here's what I've done, if you were talking about it from an interview context, right, for applying for a sales job.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, everyone's agreeing. Murli has said sales is 70% listening, 30% talking.
I agree with Murli.
Simon has agreed. So have you. I agree too. Johnny says, listen with curiosity is a skill set. Yeah, listening with curiosity is a skill set. And
that's absolutely true. Yeah.
And of course, Simon says, listen to learn, because unless you are truly listening, what have you learned about solving a real need? Again, like Wilson, we teach people how to really understand what the need is and deliver. I mean, only then you get a place at the table, as you said, to be able to talk about stuff. There's so much we could talk about. I'm just going to,
I know,
maybe kind of connect it back to careers a little more, and just kind of over the next few minutes summarize where we are. We spoke about curiosity, empathy, listening, questions, listening more than talking, connecting it back to things that you need to grow your career. You need to network, you need to find people. I think a lot of us spend a lot of time in the technical aspect of it. Like, for example, if I were to ask you, Vivek, who is a better salesperson? Someone who knows the product better or knows the people on the other side better? Clearly it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, and you know this as much as I do, Simon. We talk about this in the bicycle over and over again. Sham, we talk about this in the
Yeah.
bicycle over and over again. Sorry, I just saw Simon's name pop by. So and yes, it is not one or the other. It's a balance
It
of
is
both.
both, isn't it? Yeah.
Right? And the reason why we use the analogy of the bicycle is because the most effective way to make the bicycle is when two wheels are the same size.
Yes.
And if we were to equate the characteristics of both those wheels to skills, then you've got your technical ability, which is your engineering degree or whatever that you studied, which is what
Yes.
got you into the field, as your back wheel, and your ability to interact and work with people as your front wheel. If you look at those two as a skill, then it almost becomes a requirement for you to balance those two, because otherwise it's going to be uncomfortable for you. One, it's going to be very uncomfortable for the other person as well. Yeah.
Spot on. And this is where the huge connect with career progression is. We spend so much time on writing a fantastic CV, talking about the technical skills, talking about uh, things you have done, achieved, etc., etc., etc. But picking up the phone and talking to somebody and trying to understand what the job is about, where the connect is, what you can do for them, that's the people aspect of it. I still
Yeah.
feel that it's simply very badly imbalanced. So, for example,
Yeah.
I work with clients where they've spent months polishing a CV but never spoken to anybody. So I just say, shelve the CV for a week. You are going to talk to 5 new people this week. That's all you're going to do.
That's a
Just
sales
shelve the
target right
CV.
there.
Yeah, that's it. That's a sales
Talk
technique
to
and a
5 people
target.
every week is a sales target.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Jeevan says thanks. Prasanna has a follow up. I've come across a lot of sales trainer jobs which demanded NLP. Is it really useful to know that?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I guess it can help to some degree. I don't know if I put it as a requirement. Sham, what's been your experience with this?
I mean, it's a very interesting space. I don't. Is it really useful to know that? See, I am a lifelong learner. If you say, is it useful to learn something, I'll say just learn it and see what happens.
Yeah. That's true.
Because
Yeah.
I tend to, if I can, if I prioritize it and I go, it seems like really interesting and really something that may help. I tend to at least get to know a little bit. So what I tend to do, Prasanna, is instead of asking, is it useful, is it not useful? I would say learn in layers. Don't read the book, read a book summary. Don't read the book summary, watch a YouTube video. Don't watch the YouTube video. Listen to, I don't know, a 1 minute thing by an author. Just there's book summaries on YouTube and all that, like 5 minute summaries. Just kind of get a feel for it, and then you'll be able to connect the dots. So don't buy a 400-page book and say I can't read the book. I don't do that either. So I tend to read a summary or watch a quick YouTube video and say, have I made a connection now? Okay, now I'll go deeper. Yeah. All right. Johnny has said you can only talk if you listen. Indeed, that is so well put. That's almost sounds like Wilson learning talk. Of you have earn the right to do something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, brilliant! Yeah, Vivek, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been
I have
great.
to. Thank you.
I'm just going to quickly summarize for the listeners who might watch this video later. And of course, this is David Yesford adding a comment. Unfortunately, David, your name's not coming up on the StreamYard stream, but I know it from the LinkedIn page. This is David saying LNP would offer a perspective and increase your knowledge base. Agree with your comments. All right. I do have more questions coming in. Shivakumar asks, how do I go about developing a connection into a career mentor coach? Or how do you go about developing a connection with a career coach? I think is a question. I mean, you could Google, you could LinkedIn, you could find them. And to be honest, most coaches offer like a quick chat option for you to get to know them. So if you just do career coach into LinkedIn, you'll find dozens of us, including myself. And just look at their profiles, look at what they have said, look at their bios, look at their experience. Bring it to 3-5 people that you think will be able to help you with whatever you need, and then just say, hey, I would like to talk to you and see if we could work together. Remember, coaching is a partnership. Okay. Coaches don't fix problems. They do not give you solutions. So if you're looking for solutions, a coach is not right. A mentor might be more applicable. The mentors are people who have been in similar situations as you before and have lived through experiences that you are experiencing and might have direct answers for you. Coaches are those who help you live through the experience you have, even if they have not lived through them themselves. They will ask you the right questions. They'll ask you, really deep questions on how you could see your situation a bit better and find clarity through that. Hope that helps you, Shivkumar. Right. Vivek, my kind of summary to this really is that sales is no different to coaching.
I don't think so. And the interesting thing about that, Tom, is I used to run away from sales when I just started working. Like with a vengeance, I would run away.
Yeah.
Until I started my own business and I just had to sell.
Yeah.
So again, you have to put yourself, once you've already put yourself out there, you don't have a choice, right? So you just have to go.
That's exactly what happened to me too. So I had never written on LinkedIn. I'd never written a resume for like nearly 20 years. And then I started my own thing and I'm like, okay, I've got to do this now. I've got to sell myself. But to be honest, to Prasanna's point earlier about philanthropy, no, it's not philanthropy. It really is serving a real need. Yeah. And it is about helping, but not helping from a purely altruistic perspective. There's a business angle to it. So I love that balance you spoke about, Vivek, that you're trying to solve someone's problem. Yes, but then of course you've got to meet your targets and do something for your organization as well and help them grow and all of that as well. So it's a bit of both. And that is no different to finding a job. Remember that they're not doing a favor by giving you a paycheck. You are solving a problem for the company, right? So it's a relationship, more than just a transaction. So.
Yeah. And on that note, just like in sales, because you're solving the problem, you also should probably not be arrogant about it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, just bring it back down a little.
Yeah, bring it back down. Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, so many parallels. I know an hour doesn't do justice to this conversation. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to continue this with you.
Anytime. Happy to be back. Yeah. Love to
fantastic to have this. And thank you, all of you, Shivkumar, David, Prasanna, Johnny, Jeevan, Simon, who else? Ajay. Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We've had a great time. I hope this has been useful for you too. Vivek, I hope to call you back very soon.
Yeah. Anytime. We'll probably talk tomorrow anyway on something else, but let's plan this another time for sure. Absolutely.
Let's do that and continue this, and we'll have more questions for sure. And see you again here soon, Vivek.
Thanks, Shyam. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for your comments and questions. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Until next time, folks. Bye-bye.